Tonight is not ordinary. This is not routine prayer. This is a divine interruption. I came with a mandate from heaven to confront, dismantle, and overthrow every generational curse that has dared to operate in your bloodline. The cycle stops here. The patterns end now. What ran in your family for decades will not survive this moment, because when the authority of God collides with the chains of the enemy, something must break. I need you to understand that what you are fighting is not just what you see, it is what has been programmed, repeated, and reinforced through generations. But I hear the Spirit of the Lord saying, I have given you power to trample over every stronghold, every inherited limitation, every unseen force. Tonight, we are not negotiating with darkness, we are issuing eviction notices. Every curse that has spoken over your life is about to be silenced by the superior voice of God. Lift your faith right now, because this is a prophetic moment. As we pray, chains are snapping, yokes are being destroyed, and spiritual contracts are being revoked. That thing that followed your mother, your father, your lineage, it loses its grip on you tonight. You are the interruption. You are the cycle breaker. You are the one heaven has chosen to rewrite the story of your family. I decree and declare that as you engage in this prayer, something is shifting in your favor. Doors that were closed by generational patterns are opening. Blessings that were blocked are being released. You are stepping into a new dimension of freedom, authority, and victory. And if you believe that, I need you to partner with this moment like this video, subscribe to this channel for daily prayers, and write amen in the comments as a prophetic declaration that it is already done. And don't just stop there. Comment one thing you are believing God for today, because your faith is activating your breakthrough. As we go forward, prepare yourself, because this is not just prayer, this is warfare. And when we are done, every curse will be broken, every chain destroyed, and you will rise in power and purpose and in undeniable victory. There are moments in life when you begin to notice patterns that cannot be explained by coincidence alone. You see cycles repeating themselves, struggles that seem familiar, delays that feel inherited, battles that did not begin with you yet somehow found their way into your life. And if you listen closely, beneath the surface of your everyday experiences, you can almost hear the echo of history speaking through your present. But tonight, we are not here to be observers of cycles. We are here to confront them, because generational curses are not always loud or obvious. Sometimes they whisper. They hide in behaviors, in mindsets, in recurring disappointments, in unexplained limitations. They show up as patterns of fear, patterns of lack, patterns of brokenness that move from one generation to another like an unseen current. And if they are not confronted, they continue. If they are not interrupted, they repeat. But the moment awareness meets authority, something begins to shift. You must first understand that you are not powerless against what has been passed down. You are not a prisoner of your lineage. You are not bound to repeat what you have seen. There is a higher authority available to you, and that authority is not limited by history, bloodline, or background. It is divine. And when you step into that authority, you are no longer just a participant in your family story. You become the one who rewrites it. There are things that may have run in your family for years, cycles of struggle, cycles of broken relationships, cycles of delay, cycles of limitation. But just because something has been consistent does not mean it is permanent. Consistency does not equal destiny. Patterns can be broken. Cycles can be interrupted. What has been carried for generations can be released in a moment of divine encounter. But confrontation requires intention. It requires you to recognize what you are dealing with and refuse to normalize it. Too often, people accept cycles because they have seen them for so long. They say, this is just how things are, or this is just how my family is. But there comes a point where you must draw a line and say, it may have been, but it will not continue through me. That declaration is not arrogance, it is alignment with a higher truth. Because when you begin to confront generational patterns, you are not just dealing with surface issues, you are addressing roots. And anything that has a root must be uprooted if it is going to be removed. You cannot trim what needs to be torn out. You cannot manage what must be dismantled. This is why confrontation is necessary. It is the beginning of transformation. And as you begin this process, you may feel resistance. Not everything leaves quietly. Some patterns have been reinforced over time, strengthened through repetition, embedded into ways of thinking and living. But resistance does not mean impossibility. It simply means that what you are confronting recognizes that its time is up. And when something realizes it can no longer stay, it will often push back before it lets go. But you must remain steady. You must remain anchored, because the power you are operating in is greater than anything you are confronting. This is not about your strength alone. This is about divine authority flowing through you. And divine authority does not negotiate with what it has already overcome. As you begin to confront generational curses, clarity becomes your ally. You start to see things differently. What once felt normal begins to stand out. What once felt inevitable begins to feel questionable. And in that awareness, you gain the ability to respond differently, because transformation does not begin with what you do. It begins with what you see. And when you see clearly, you can speak clearly. Your words begin to shift. You no longer speak from a place of defeat. You speak from a place of authority. You no longer agree with the patterns. You confront them. You no longer reinforce the cycle. You interrupt it. And every time you choose alignment over agreement with what has been, you weaken the hold of what once was. There is something powerful about making a decision that the cycle stops with you. It is not always easy, but it is always significant. Because when one person decides to confront what has been carried for generations, it creates a ripple effect. What you break does not just affect you. It affects what comes after you. It changes trajectories. It opens possibilities. It creates space for something new to emerge. And as you continue in this posture of confrontation, you begin to experience shifts. Some are immediate, others are gradual, but all are meaningful. You notice changes in your mindset, changes in your responses, changes in the way you approach situations that once felt overwhelming. What used to trigger you no longer has the same power. What used to limit you no longer defines you. This is the evidence of transformation at work. Not just external change, but internal renewal. Because when generational patterns are confronted, it is not just about breaking what was, it is about establishing what will be. It is about replacing old patterns with new ones, old beliefs with renewed understanding, old limitations with expanded possibilities. And in this process, patience becomes important, not because the power is lacking, because growth takes time to manifest fully. Fully, you are not just breaking cycles, you are building a new foundation. And foundations must be strong, stable, and intentional. Every decision you make, every thought you align, and every word you speak contributes to that foundation. So you continue. You stay committed, you remain aware, because confrontation is not a one-time event. It is a posture. It is a decision you make daily to refuse agreement with anything that does not align with truth, freedom, and purpose. It is a commitment to live differently, think differently, and respond differently. And as you do, something remarkable begins to happen. What once felt like a struggle begins to feel like strength. What once felt like a burden begins to feel like purpose. You realize that you were not just chosen to endure, you were chosen to transform. You were not just meant to survive the pattern, you were meant to break it. And in that realization, there is a quiet confidence that begins to grow. Not loud, not forceful, but steady. A knowing that you are no longer bound by what was. A knowing that you are moving in a different direction. A knowing that what you are building now will not resemble what you have seen before, because confrontation leads to freedom, and freedom leads to possibility. And possibility opens doors that cycles once kept closed. You begin to see opportunities where there were once limitations. You begin to experience peace where there was once tension. You begin to walk in a sense of clarity and purpose that was once clouded by repetition. And this is not accidental. This is the result of intentional confrontation, the result of choosing not to ignore what needed to be addressed, the result of stepping into authority and refusing to remain in agreement with cycles that no longer have permission to continue. So you keep going. You stay grounded. You remain aware of the authority you carry and the transformation you are walking in. Because every step you take in this direction reinforces the break. Every decision you make in alignment with truth strengthens the shift. Every moment you choose differently establishes something new. And as this continues, it becomes less about what you are breaking and more about what you are becoming. Because ultimately, confronting generational curses is not just about ending something. It is about beginning something. A new pattern, a new path, a new story that reflects freedom, clarity, and purpose in a way that was once unimaginable. And in this space, you find a calm strength, a steady assurance that what once was no longer defines what is, a quiet confidence that the cycle has been interrupted and will not resume. a deep awareness that you are walking in something greater, something freer, something that is no longer bound by the limitations of the past. There is a level of authority that many people are aware of, but few truly walk in. It is not loud, it is not forced, and it does not rely on external validation. It is a quiet, steady knowing that you have been given power beyond what you see, beyond what you feel, beyond what you have experienced. And when you begin to understand this authority, everything about the way you approach life begins to shift. Because spiritual authority is not something you strive to earn, it is something you awaken to. It has already been made available, already been established, already been placed within your reach. The question is not whether it exists, but whether you recognize it, whether you step into it, whether you allow it to shape the way you think, speak, and act. For many, inherited patterns feel stronger than personal authority. What has been repeated over generations can feel immovable, deeply rooted, almost permanent. But authority does not come from repetition. It comes from alignment with a higher source. And when you are aligned with that source, what has been repeated must respond to what has been released. You are not called to observe inherited patterns as if they are unchangeable. You are called to stand in a position where those patterns must answer to the authority you carry. This is not about striving or forcing change. It is about recognizing that what is within you is greater than what has been passed down to you. And when that recognition becomes real to you, it changes the way you respond. You no longer approach life from a place of reaction. You begin to move from a place of intention. You no longer feel controlled by what shows up. You begin to influence what remains. This is what it means to exercise authority. It is not about control over everything, but clarity over what you allow. Because authority begins with awareness. You become aware of what aligns with truth and what does not. You become aware of patterns that no longer have permission to stay. You begin to notice where you have been agreeing with things that were never meant to define you. And in that awareness, you gain the ability to choose differently. Choice is one of the most powerful expressions of authority, not just in large, visible decisions, but in the small, consistent moments that shape your direction. The way you respond to pressure, the way you interpret challenges, the way you speak about your life. These are all expressions of the authority you are either stepping into or stepping away from. And as you begin to exercise this authority, you may notice that old patterns try to present themselves again, not because they are stronger, but because they are familiar. And familiarity can be persuasive if you are not grounded in awareness. But when you are aware, you can recognize the pattern without re-entering it. You can see it without submitting to it. This is where authority becomes practical. It is not just a concept, it is a way of living. It shows up in how you think, how you speak, how you respond. It becomes part of your posture. And over time, that posture becomes your new normal. There is something powerful about consistency in authority. Not dramatic, not forced, but steady. Choosing alignment again and again. Refusing agreement with what does not serve your growth. Remaining grounded even when circumstances try to pull you in a different direction. This kind of consistency creates change that is not easily undone. Because when you consistently operate in authority, inherited patterns begin to lose their influence. What once felt automatic becomes optional. What once felt inevitable becomes avoidable. You begin to see that you are not at the mercy of what has been. You are participating in what is becoming. And this participation is intentional. It is not passive. It requires you to stay aware, to stay grounded, to stay connected to the source of your authority. Because authority without connection becomes effort, and effort alone cannot sustain transformation. But when you remain connected, authority flows naturally, steadily, without strain. And in that flow, there is a sense of calm, not because everything around you is perfect, but because you are no longer defined by what surrounds you. You are anchored in something deeper, something more stable, something that does not shift with circumstances. This calm is not weakness, it is strength. It is the result of knowing where your authority comes from and how it operates. It is the result of choosing alignment over reaction, clarity over confusion, intention over impulse. And the more you remain in this space, the more it becomes your default. You begin to notice that situations that once overwhelmed you no longer have the same effect. Patterns that once repeated begin to fade. Responses that once felt automatic begin to change. And all of this happens not because you forced it, but because you exercised authority consistently, intentionally, and with awareness. There is also a level of responsibility that comes with authority, not in a heavy or burdensome way, but in a purposeful way. You begin to understand that your choices matter, that your alignment matters, that the way you show up influences not just your life, but the direction of what comes after you. And this awareness brings a deeper level of intention. You begin to move with purpose, not just reacting to what happens, but choosing how you engage with it. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin to respond with clarity where you once responded with uncertainty. This is the effect of authority being activated in your life. It does not remove challenges, but it changes how you experience them. It does not eliminate resistance, but it shifts your position in relation to it. You are no longer beneath what you face. You are standing above it, not in a position of arrogance, but in a position of alignment. And as this becomes more natural to you, you begin to trust yourself more. Not in a way that disconnects you from your source, but in a way that reflects your connection to it. You begin to trust your decisions, your responses, your direction, because you know that you are not operating from impulse, you are operating from awareness. And this trust allows you to move forward with confidence, not rushed, not pressured, but steady. You are no longer trying to prove anything. You are simply living from a place of authority that is already established. And in that space, there is freedom, freedom to choose differently, freedom to respond differently, freedom to create a different outcome than what has been repeated before. And this freedom is not temporary. It is sustainable because it is rooted in something that does not change. As you continue in this way, you begin to see the long-term impact of your choices. Patterns that once seemed permanent are no longer present. Cycles that once felt unbreakable are no longer active. And what replaces them is not chaos, but clarity, not confusion, but direction, not limitation, but possibility. And this is how authority transforms inherited patterns, not through force, but through alignment, not through struggle, but through awareness, not through momentary effort, but through consistent, intentional living. So you remain in this space. You stay aware of what you carry. You stay connected to the source of your authority. You continue to choose alignment even when it requires patience, even when it requires consistency, even when it requires you to move differently than what you have seen before. And as you do, you continue to experience the shift. Not just externally, but internally, a deeper sense of peace, a clearer sense of direction, a stronger sense of identity, all rooted in the authority you have chosen to recognize and exercise. And this authority continues to shape your path, influence your decisions, and redefine your experience in ways that go beyond what has been inherited, beyond what has been repeated, beyond what has been expected, guiding you into a way of living that reflects clarity, strength, and intentional alignment in every step you take, in every choice you make. In every moment, you remain grounded in the awareness that what is within you carries the power to transform what is around you and redirect what once seemed unchangeable into something entirely new. Something steady, something free, something no longer bound by the patterns of the past, but shaped by the authority you continue to walk in with calmness, with confidence, and with a quiet, unwavering certainty that what you are building now is no longer influenced by what you inherited, but by what you have chosen to become. There are structures in life that are not always visible, yet they shape outcomes in powerful ways. These structures are built over time, formed through repeated thoughts, reinforced through consistent behaviors, and strengthened through agreement. They become what we call strongholds, not because they are unbreakable, but because they have been unchallenged for so long that they begin to feel permanent. And before anything can be dismantled, it must first be identified. Because you cannot confront what you have not recognized. You cannot address what you have normalized. And many strongholds remain in place not because they are too powerful, but because they have gone unnoticed, quietly influencing decisions, perspectives, and responses beneath the surface. They operate in subtle ways, shaping how you see yourself, how you interpret situations, and what you believe is possible. Strongholds often begin as thoughts, small, seemingly insignificant ideas that take root over time. Thoughts like, this is just how things are, or this always happens to me, or I can't change this. And when these thoughts are repeated, they begin to form patterns. Those patterns become beliefs, and those beliefs begin to influence behavior. Over time, what started as a thought becomes a structure that feels solid, established, and difficult to move. But what has been built can also be dismantled. What has been formed through repetition can be undone through awareness and intentional change. The key is not to be overwhelmed by the size of the structure, but to focus on the process of identifying where it began and how it has been maintained. Because every stronghold has an entry point. There is a place where agreement was formed, where a thought was accepted, where a pattern was allowed to continue. And when you begin to trace that back, you gain insight. You begin to see not just what is happening, but why it has been happening. And in that understanding, you find the starting point for change. This process requires honesty, a willingness to look beneath the surface and acknowledge what has been operating without judgment, without denial, without avoidance. It is not about blame, it is about clarity. Because clarity allows you to see what needs to shift, what needs to be released, what no longer aligns with the direction you are choosing. And as you begin to identify these strongholds, you may notice that they are not always obvious. Some are deeply embedded in ways of thinking. They show up in automatic responses, in repeated reactions, in patterns that feel familiar. But familiarity does not mean truth. Familiarity simply means repetition, and repetition can be changed. There is a quiet power in pausing and observing your own patterns. Not reacting immediately, not just moving forward automatically, but taking a moment to notice what is happening within you. What thoughts arise in certain situations? What beliefs influence your decisions? What patterns seem to repeat without conscious intention? These observations are not meant to discourage you. They are meant to empower you. Because once you see clearly, you can begin to respond differently. You are no longer moving unconsciously, you are choosing with awareness. And awareness is the first step in dismantling anything that has been operating without your permission. Dismantling strongholds does not require force, it requires consistency. It requires you to interrupt patterns, to question beliefs, to replace thoughts that no longer serve you with ones that align with truth and growth. It is a process of renewal, not through pressure, but through intentional alignment. And as you begin to do this, you may notice resistance, not because change is impossible, but because change disrupts what has been comfortable. Even limiting patterns can feel familiar, and anything familiar can feel safe, even when it is not beneficial. But growth requires you to move beyond what is comfortable into what is aligned. So you continue, you stay aware, you remain intentional. You begin to speak differently, think differently, respond differently. And over time, these small, consistent shifts begin to weaken the structure of the stronghold. What once felt solid begins to lose its stability. What once felt automatic begins to feel optional. And this is where transformation becomes visible, not in a sudden, dramatic way, but in a steady, noticeable shift. You begin to respond with clarity where there was once confusion. You begin to act with intention where there was once impulse. You begin to see possibilities where there were once limitations. It is important to remember that dismantling a stronghold is not about perfection. It is about progress. It is about choosing differently more often than you did before. It is about remaining committed even when the process feels gradual. Because every step you take in awareness is a step away from what once held influence. And as you continue in this process, something begins to change internally. You start to feel a sense of freedom that was not there before. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer operating from the same place. You are no longer bound by the same patterns. You are no longer responding from the same beliefs. This internal shift creates external change. The way you interact with situations changes. The way you approach challenges changes. The way you see yourself changes. And as these shifts continue, the stronghold loses its foundation completely, because strongholds rely on agreement to remain in place. And when agreement is withdrawn, they can no longer sustain themselves. When you no longer reinforce the thought, no longer repeat the pattern, no longer align with the belief, the structure begins to collapse. This is not something that happens by accident. It happens through intention, through awareness, through consistency, through a willingness to see clearly and choose differently. And every time you do, you reinforce a new pattern, a new belief, a new direction. There is also a level of patience required in this process. Not because change is slow, but because change is layered. You are not just addressing surface behaviors. You are shifting underlying patterns. And those patterns have been built over time. But what has been built over time can be undone through consistent awareness and intentional action. And as you move forward, you begin to trust the process. You begin to see that change is happening, even if it is not always immediate. You begin to notice the small shifts, the subtle differences, the moments where you respond differently than you would have before. These moments matter. They are evidence that the stronghold is no longer in control. They are signs that you are moving in a new direction. And the more you recognize these moments, the more you reinforce the change that is taking place. Now pause for a moment and reflect deeply. What is one pattern in your life that keeps repeating, even when you desire something different? What is one belief that you have accepted without questioning that may be limiting your growth? I want you to be honest with yourself, and then I want you to write it in the comments, not casually, but intentionally. Because what you acknowledge, you can address. As you bring that awareness into the open, something begins to shift. Because silence often sustains strongholds, but clarity begins to dismantle them. When you name it, when you recognize it, when you bring it into your conscious awareness, it no longer operates in the same hidden way. And from that place, you continue the process. You remain aware of your thoughts, your responses, your patterns. You continue to choose alignment over familiarity. You continue to replace what no longer serves you with what supports your growth and direction. And over time, what once felt like a stronghold becomes a memory. Not something that defines you, but something you moved beyond. Something you recognized, addressed, and dismantled through awareness and intentional change. And in its place, you establish something new, a new pattern of thinking, a new way of responding. A new perspective that reflects clarity, freedom, and alignment. Something that is not built on repetition of the past, but on intentional choices in the present. And this new structure becomes your foundation. Not something fragile, but something steady. Not something forced, but something natural, because it is built through awareness, through consistency, through a willingness to see clearly and live intentionally. And as you continue in this way, you realize that you are no longer shaped by what once influenced you. You are now shaping your direction with clarity, with purpose, with awareness. You are no longer reinforcing old patterns. You are establishing new ones. And this process continues not as a struggle, but as a steady rhythm of awareness and alignment. A way of living that keeps you grounded, intentional, and free from the patterns that once operated without question, guiding you into a space where your thoughts are aligned. Your responses are intentional, and your direction is no longer influenced by what once held you, but by what you now choose with clarity, with awareness, and with a calm, steady commitment to continue identifying, addressing, and dismantling anything that no longer aligns with the life you are intentionally building and the freedom you are consistently walking in. There are agreements in life that are not always spoken out loud, yet they carry influence across time, shaping patterns, decisions, and outcomes in ways that often go unnoticed. These agreements can be formed through experiences, through repeated exposure, through what was modeled, accepted, or left unchallenged. And over time, they become part of the internal framework through which life is interpreted. But not every agreement is meant to remain, and not every pattern is meant to continue. Because some things are inherited without intention. Some patterns are passed down not as choices, but as defaults, ways of thinking, ways of responding, ways of navigating life that were shaped long before you became aware of them. And if they are not examined, they continue quietly, influencing direction without permission. But the moment awareness is activated, you gain the ability to step back and evaluate what you have been carrying. Renouncing ancestral agreements is not about rejecting history. It is about discerning what aligns and what does not. It is about recognizing that just because something existed before you does not mean it must exist through you. It is about creating space between what was inherited and what is intentionally chosen. And that space is where transformation begins. Because when you begin to look closely, you may notice patterns that feel familiar but no longer feel aligned. Patterns of thinking that limit rather than expand. Patterns of response that create cycles instead of change. Patterns that seem to repeat across generations, not because they are necessary, but because they have never been interrupted. An interruption begins with a decision, a quiet, intentional decision to no longer agree with what does not serve your growth, your clarity, or your direction. This is not a loud or dramatic moment. It is a steady shift, a recognition that you have the ability to choose differently, to respond differently, to align differently. There is something powerful about withdrawing agreement, because agreement is what sustains patterns. When something is agreed with consciously or unconsciously, it continues. But when agreement is removed, the pattern begins to lose its influence. It no longer has the same authority, the same weight, the same presence. This is why awareness is so important. You begin to notice where agreement has been given without intention. You begin to see where certain beliefs were accepted simply because they were familiar. And as you see these things clearly, you gain the ability to step back and make a new choice. This process requires honesty, but also gentleness. It is not about judgment or criticism. It is about clarity. It is about understanding that what was inherited was not necessarily chosen, and what was accepted can now be evaluated. You are not bound to continue something simply because it has been consistent. And as you begin to renounce these agreements, you may feel a sense of shift internally. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but steadily. A sense that you are no longer aligned with what once felt automatic. A sense that you are creating distance between yourself and patterns that once felt inseparable. This distance is important. It allows you to observe rather than absorb. It allows you to respond rather than repeat. It creates space for new perspectives to form, for new patterns to emerge, for new choices to be made. Because renouncing is not just about releasing, it is also about replacing. It is about choosing what you will now align with, what beliefs you will now carry, what patterns you will now establish. And this choice is what shapes your direction moving forward. You begin to intentionally align with thoughts that support clarity, with perspectives that encourage growth, with responses that reflect awareness. And as you do, the old agreements lose their relevance. They no longer fit. They no longer resonate. They no longer feel like something you must carry. And in this process, patience becomes part of the journey, not because change is distant, but because change is layered. You are not just shifting surface behaviors, you are realigning underlying agreements. And those agreements have been reinforced over time. But what has been reinforced can also be released through consistent awareness and intentional alignment. You may also notice moments where old patterns attempt to resurface. Not because they are stronger, but because they are familiar. And familiarity has a way of presenting itself, especially in moments of pressure or uncertainty. But when you are aware, you can recognize the pattern without stepping back into it. This is where your intention becomes important. You remain grounded in your decision. You stay aware of what you have chosen to release and what you have chosen to embrace. And in doing so, you continue to move forward, even when the process feels gradual. There is a quiet strength in consistency, not in forcing change, but in choosing alignment again and again, in noticing when something no longer fits and gently redirecting yourself toward what does, in remaining present, aware, and intentional in your choices. And as you continue in this way, something begins to shift within you. A sense of clarity begins to grow. A sense of direction becomes more defined. You begin to feel less influenced by what once shaped your responses and more guided by what you are now intentionally choosing. This is the result of renouncing what no longer aligns. It creates freedom, not as a sudden moment, but as a steady experience. A freedom to think differently, to respond differently, to move in a direction that is no longer dictated by inherited patterns. Now take a moment to reflect quietly within yourself. What is one belief or pattern that you have carried for a long time that may not truly belong to you? Something that feels familiar but not aligned. Something that you may have accepted without ever questioning. I want you to be honest with yourself and then write it in the comments. Because what you bring into awareness is what you begin to release. As you acknowledge that, you begin to take ownership of your direction. Not in a heavy way, but in an intentional way. You recognize that you are not simply continuing what has been, you are actively choosing what will be. And this choice begins to influence everything. The way you think, the way you respond, the way you approach situations. You begin to notice that your reactions are changing, your perspectives are shifting, your decisions are becoming more aligned with clarity rather than familiarity. And over time, the old agreements lose their presence entirely. Not because they were forced out, but because they were no longer sustained. They no longer had agreement. They no longer had alignment. They no longer had a place within the framework you are now building. And what replaces them is something intentional, something chosen, something aligned with the direction you are moving in. A new set of beliefs, a new way of thinking, a new pattern of responding that reflects clarity, awareness, and purpose. And this becomes your new foundation, not something imposed, but something developed through awareness and choice, something that feels steady, grounded, and aligned with who you are becoming. And as you continue in this space, you realize that you are no longer defined by what was passed down. You are now defined by what you have chosen to carry forward. And that choice continues to shape your path, influence your direction, and create a way of living that is no longer tied to inherited agreements, but rooted in intentional alignment, steady awareness, and a calm, ongoing commitment to release what no longer serves and embrace what supports your growth, your clarity, and your purpose in a way that continues to unfold with quiet strength and consistent intention as you move forward step by step, decision by decision, remaining aware of what you are choosing, what you are releasing, and what you are becoming. In each moment you stay aligned with what truly reflects the direction you are now intentionally creating. There is a dimension of life that is not governed by what is seen, but by what is understood, received, and activated within. It is not loud, it is not forced, and it does not demand attention, yet it carries a depth of power that quietly transforms everything it touches. This is the realm of divine power and dominion. Not something distant or unreachable, but something present, available, and waiting to be recognized. Many people move through life aware of challenges, aware of limitations, aware of patterns that seem difficult to change, yet unaware of the authority and power that has already been made accessible to them. And when something remains unrecognized, it often remains unused, not because it is absent, but because it has not been activated through awareness and alignment. Divine power is not something that is achieved through effort alone. It is not the result of striving or proving. It is the result of connection, a steady, intentional alignment with a higher source that is not influenced by circumstance, not limited by history, and not defined by what has been repeated over time. And when that connection becomes real to you, something within you begins to shift. You begin to understand that you are not operating from a place of lack, but from a place of access, not from limitation, but from possibility, not from restriction, but from expansion. And this understanding changes the way you approach everything. Because when you know that power is available, you begin to move differently. Dominion, in its essence, is not about control over everything. It is about alignment within yourself. It is about clarity in your thoughts, intentionality in your actions, and steadiness in your responses. It is about knowing what you carry and allowing that awareness to shape how you engage with life. Because without activation, power remains potential. And potential, while valuable, does not create change until it is expressed. Activation is what bridges the gap between what is available and what is experienced. It is the moment where awareness becomes action, where understanding becomes embodiment, and activation begins with recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that what you need is not outside of you waiting to be found, but already within reach, waiting to be engaged. This recognition is not dramatic. It is subtle yet profound. It shifts your perspective from searching to aligning, from striving to receiving. As you begin to activate divine power, you may notice a shift in how you think. Thoughts that once felt limiting begin to lose their hold. Perspectives that once felt fixed begin to open. You begin to see beyond what is immediately visible and recognize possibilities that were once overlooked. This shift in thinking leads to a shift in response. You no longer react automatically, you respond intentionally. You no longer feel confined by circumstances. You begin to influence them through your alignment and awareness. This is the practical expression of dominion, not forceful, but steady. There is also a sense of calm that comes with activation. Not because everything around you changes instantly, but because something within you becomes stable. You are no longer moved by every external situation. You are anchored in something deeper, something consistent, something that does not fluctuate with what you see. And this calm is not passive. It is powerful. It allows you to remain clear even in uncertain situations. It allows you to stay grounded even when challenges arise. It allows you to move with intention rather than reaction. This is what happens when power is not just understood, but activated. As you continue in this space, you begin to notice that your choices reflect your alignment. You begin to choose what supports your growth, what reflects clarity, what aligns with purpose. You become more aware of what you allow, what you engage with, what you give your attention to. Because attention is one of the ways power is directed. What you focus on influences what grows. What you consistently give your attention to begins to shape your experience. And when you are aware of this, You begin to direct your attention with intention. You begin to focus on what aligns with truth, with growth, with possibility. You begin to withdraw attention from what reinforces limitation, from what sustains old patterns, from what does not support your direction. And in doing so, you begin to see change not forced but natural. Dominion also involves responsibility, not in a burdensome way, but in an intentional way. You begin to understand that your choices matter, that your alignment matters, that the way you think and respond influences the direction of your life. This awareness leads to a deeper level of presence. You are no longer moving unconsciously. You are aware of your thoughts, your responses, your direction. You are engaged in your own growth, not passively, but intentionally. And as you remain in this state of awareness, activation continues. It is not a one-time moment. It is a continuous process, a steady unfolding of understanding, alignment, and expression. Each day, each moment, you have the opportunity to engage with what is available to you. You may also notice that as you activate this power, certain patterns begin to shift without effort, not because you force them to change, but because they no longer align with the level of awareness you are operating from. What once felt normal begins to feel out of place. What once felt necessary begins to feel unnecessary. This is not loss, it is refinement. It is the natural result of moving into a different level of alignment. And as this continues, you begin to feel a sense of clarity that was not there before, a sense of direction that is not based on external validation, but on internal awareness. This clarity influences how you move forward. You are no longer uncertain about every step. You are guided by a steady awareness of what aligns and what does not. You begin to trust this awareness, not impulsively, but consistently. And this trust strengthens your ability to remain in alignment. You are no longer easily pulled in different directions. You remain steady. You are no longer easily influenced by external pressure. You remain grounded. This is the expression of dominion, not controlling everything around you, but maintaining alignment within yourself regardless of what is around you. It is a quiet strength, a steady presence, a consistent awareness that shapes how you engage with life. As you continue to activate this power, you may also notice an increased sense of purpose. Not in a forced or defined way, but in a natural unfolding. You begin to feel more connected to what you are doing, more intentional in how you are living, more aware of the direction you are moving in. This sense of purpose is not separate from power, it is a result of it. Because when you are aligned, you begin to move in ways that reflect clarity and intention. You are no longer drifting, you are directed. And this direction continues to unfold as you remain engaged, aware, and aligned. Each moment becomes an opportunity to activate what is already available to you. Each decision becomes an expression of the dominion you are walking in. You begin to see that power is not something you reach for occasionally. It is something you live from consistently. It becomes part of how you think, how you respond, how you move through life. And in this consistency, something becomes established, not just temporary change, but lasting alignment, a way of living that is grounded, intentional, and steady, a way of being that reflects awareness, clarity, and quiet strength. And as this continues, you realize that you are no longer waiting for change. You are participating in it. You are no longer hoping for different outcomes. You are aligning with them. You are no longer limited by what has been. You are moving with what is now available to you. And this movement is not rushed. It is not forced. It is steady, calm, and intentional. A continuous activation of divine power and dominion that shapes your direction, influences your experience, and aligns your life with a deeper level of awareness that continues to unfold with clarity, with purpose, and with a quiet, unwavering strength that remains consistent as you move forward, grounded in the understanding that what you carry within you is not only sufficient, but powerful enough to influence, transform, and redefine the way you live, the way you respond, and the way you continue to walk in alignment with what has already been made available to you, allowing that awareness to guide you step by step, moment by moment, as you remain present, intentional, and connected to the steady flow of power that continues to operate within you, shaping your path in ways that are calm, clear, and deeply rooted in the alignment you continue to choose every single day. There is a quiet place within every person where restoration begins, not as a sudden event, but as a gentle unfolding. It does not arrive with noise or force, but with a steady presence that brings things back into alignment, back into clarity, back into a sense of wholeness that may have felt distant for a long time. And when you begin to experience this, you realize that healing is not something outside of you. It is something that flows into you through you and gradually reshapes what once felt broken or misaligned. Because healing is not always visible at first. It often begins beneath the surface in places that are not immediately seen but deeply felt. It begins in your thoughts, in your perceptions, in the way you interpret your experiences. It begins in the quiet decision to no longer carry what has been weighing on you, even if you are still learning how to release it fully. And restoration follows a similar rhythm. It is not rushed, and it does not demand perfection. It meets you where you are and moves with you, step by step, as you become more aware of what needs to be renewed. It does not erase the past, but it changes your relationship with it. It allows you to see differently, to feel differently, to respond differently. There are moments when life leaves an imprint, experiences that linger, patterns that repeat, emotions that resurface. And without healing, these imprints can shape your responses in ways that feel automatic. But when healing begins, those same imprints lose their intensity. They no longer define your reactions. They no longer carry the same weight. Freedom in this context is not the absence of memory. It is the absence of restriction. It is the ability to move forward without being held back by what once limited you. It is the ability to experience life without the constant influence of past patterns shaping your present responses. And this freedom is not something that arrives all at once. It unfolds gradually through awareness, through acceptance, through a willingness to allow change to take place within you. It is not about forcing yourself to feel differently. It is about creating space for something new to emerge. There is a gentleness in this process that is often overlooked. Healing does not require harshness. It does not require you to push yourself beyond what you can hold. It invites you to move with patience, to remain present, to allow each step to unfold naturally. And as you begin to engage with this process, you may notice a shift in how you relate to yourself. There is less resistance, less judgment, less pressure to be anything other than where you are in the moment. This acceptance is not resignation. It is the foundation for transformation. Because when you accept where you are, you create space to move forward without conflict. Restoration also brings clarity. It allows you to see what has been influencing your thoughts, your responses, your patterns. And with that clarity comes the ability to choose differently. Not from a place of force, but from a place of understanding. You begin to notice where certain reactions no longer align with who you are becoming. You begin to recognize where old patterns are no longer necessary. And in that recognition, you gently shift. You respond with intention instead of habit. You choose with awareness instead of impulse. And these small shifts begin to create a larger transformation. Not all at once, but steadily. You begin to feel lighter, not because everything has changed, but because you are no longer carrying what you once did. You begin to feel clearer, not because all questions are answered, but because your perspective has shifted. There is also a deep sense of renewal that comes with restoration, a feeling that something within you is being rebuilt, not from the outside, but from within, a foundation that is steady, grounded, and aligned with who you are now, not who you were before. This renewal influences every part of your life, the way you think, the way you respond, the way you engage with others. It brings a sense of calm that is not dependent on circumstances, a steadiness that remains even when things around you are uncertain. And in this calm, there is strength, not loud or forceful, but consistent, a strength that allows you to remain present, to remain aware, to remain aligned even when challenges arise. This is the strength that comes from healing, not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to move through it without losing your center. As you continue in this process, you may also notice that your capacity expands. You are able to hold more understanding, more awareness, more clarity. You are able to navigate situations with a sense of ease that was not there before. This is not because life has become simpler, but because you have become more aligned. You are no longer reacting from old patterns. You are responding from a place of clarity. You are no longer carrying unresolved weight. You are moving with a sense of openness. And this openness allows for new experiences to enter your life, new perspectives, new opportunities, new ways of engaging that reflect the change that has taken place within you. You are no longer limited by what was. You are open to what is now possible. Healing also brings a deeper connection to yourself, a sense of knowing, a sense of awareness that is not dependent on external validation. You begin to trust your own process, your own growth, your own unfolding. This trust is not built overnight. It develops through consistency, through showing up for yourself, through remaining present, through allowing the process to continue without rushing it. And as this trust grows, so does your sense of stability. You begin to feel more grounded, more centered, more at ease within yourself. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer in conflict with where you are. You are aligned with your process, and that alignment brings peace. And as this peace becomes more consistent, it begins to influence how you move through life. You are no longer easily overwhelmed, no longer easily pulled into patterns that once held you. You remain steady, aware, and intentional. This is the expression of freedom, not the absence of challenges, but the presence of clarity. The ability to remain aligned regardless of what is happening around you. The ability to choose your response instead of being driven by old patterns. And this freedom continues to expand as you remain engaged in the process of healing and restoration. Each moment of awareness strengthens it. Each intentional choice reinforces it. Each step forward builds upon it. You begin to see that healing is not something you complete. It is something you live. A continuous unfolding of understanding, of alignment, of renewal. A steady movement toward wholeness that is not forced but allowed. And in allowing, there is a sense of ease. Not because everything is effortless, but because you are no longer resisting the process. You are moving with it, not against it. You are allowing what needs to be released, and what needs to be restored to be restored. And as you continue in this way, you realize that freedom is not something distant, it is something present, something that grows with each moment of awareness, each intentional choice, each step you take in alignment with the healing that is unfolding within you. And this unfolding continues quietly and steadily, shaping your thoughts, your responses, your direction in ways that reflect clarity, renewal, and a deep sense of alignment that is no longer influenced by what once held you, but guided by what is now being restored within you, allowing you to move forward with a calm and steady awareness that you are no longer carrying what you once did, no longer responding from what once shaped you, but living from a place of wholeness that continues to grow, expand, and deepen as you remain present, intentional, and open to the ongoing process of healing, restoration, and freedom that is unfolding within you with quiet strength and consistent clarity. There comes a moment in your life when you begin to realize that you are not just living for yourself, but you are shaping something that will continue beyond you. Every thought you cultivate, every decision you make, every pattern you reinforce or release is quietly forming a legacy, not always visible in the moment, not always recognized immediately, but steadily building a direction that extends further than your present experience. And when you become aware of this, something shifts within you. You begin to see your life not just as a series of events, but as a foundation, a structure that is being formed day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. And this awareness invites you to become more intentional, not out of pressure, but iwaldu clarity. Because a legacy is not something that begins later. It is something that is established now. In the way you think, in the way you respond, in the way you align yourself with what you choose to carry forward. It is not built through grand gestures alone, but through consistent patterns that define the direction of your life. And if patterns have been passed down, then patterns can also be transformed. What once defined a family line does not have to continue indefinitely. There is always a point where a shift can occur, where a new direction can be established, where something different can begin. Establishing a new legacy does not require you to erase what came before. It requires you to evaluate it, to understand it, and to choose what aligns with where you are going. It is not about rejection. It is about refinement. It is about carrying forward what is beneficial and releasing what no longer serves. This process begins within. Before anything is seen externally, it is formed internally. In your thoughts, your beliefs, your perspective, you begin to align yourself with a different way of thinking, one that reflects clarity, growth, and possibility rather than limitation or repetition. And as your thinking shifts, your actions follow. Not in a forced or dramatic way, but naturally. You begin to respond differently to situations that once triggered old patterns. You begin to make decisions that reflect intention rather than habit. You begin to move in a direction that feels aligned rather than automatic. These shifts may seem small in the moment, but they carry significance. because consistency in these small changes creates a larger transformation over time. What you repeat becomes what you establish, and what you establish becomes what continues. There is also a level of patience involved in building a new legacy, not because change is slow, but because change is layered. You are not just altering surface behaviors, you are reshaping underlying patterns. And those patterns have been formed over time, but with awareness and consistency, they can be reformed. You may not always see the full impact of your choices immediately. Some changes unfold gradually. Some shifts become visible over time. But even when the results are not immediate, the process is active. Every intentional choice contributes to what is being built. And as you remain committed to this process, something begins to stabilize within you. A sense of direction, a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose that is not dependent on external validation, but rooted in internal alignment. This alignment becomes your guide. It influences how you think, how you respond, how you engage with life. It allows you to move with intention rather than uncertainty. It gives you a steady foundation from which to build. And as you continue in this space, you begin to notice that what once felt familiar may no longer feel aligned. Patterns that once seemed normal may now feel out of place. And this is not a loss. It is a sign of growth. It is an indication that you are no longer operating from the same framework. You are now building something new, a new pattern of thinking, a new way of responding, a new direction that reflects who you are becoming rather than what you have inherited. And this new direction begins to influence not only your life, but the environment around you. The way you engage with others shifts. The way you approach challenges evolves. The way you navigate decisions becomes more intentional. This influence is not forced, it is natural. It flows from the alignment you have established within yourself. And as it continues, it creates a ripple effect. What you embody begins to extend beyond you. This is how legacy is formed, not through isolated moments, but through consistent alignment, through a steady commitment to living in a way that reflects clarity, growth, and purpose. And as you continue to establish this, you begin to trust the process more deeply. You begin to see that your choices matter, that your direction matters, that what you are building has significance beyond what you can immediately see. This trust allows you to remain steady, even when the process feels gradual. It allows you to continue choosing alignment, even when old patterns attempt to reappear. It allows you to remain grounded in what you are building, rather than being pulled back into what has been. There is also a sense of responsibility that comes with this awareness, but it is not heavy. It is purposeful. It is the understanding that you have the ability to influence direction, to shape outcomes, to establish something that reflects intentional living. And this understanding brings a deeper level of presence. You are no longer moving unconsciously. You are aware of your choices, aware of your patterns, aware of your direction. You begin to live with intention, not out of pressure, but out of clarity. You are no longer simply reacting to life. You are actively shaping it. And as this continues, the new legacy you are building becomes more defined. It is no longer abstract. It is visible in your thoughts, your actions, your responses. It is reflected in the way you live, in the way you engage, in the way you move forward. This legacy is not bound by what came before. It is shaped by what you are choosing now. It is grounded in awareness, strengthened through consistency, and expressed through intentional living. And as you remain in this process, you begin to experience a sense of fulfillment that comes from alignment. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are living in a way that reflects clarity and purpose. You are no longer confined by repetition. You are creating direction. You are no longer defined by inherited patterns. You are establishing new ones. You are no longer limited by what has been. You are expanding into what is possible. And this expansion continues as long as you remain engaged, aware, and intentional. Each moment offers an opportunity to reinforce what you are building. Each decision contributes to the foundation you are establishing. And over time, this foundation becomes strong, stable, and consistent, not because it was built quickly, but because it was built intentionally, with awareness, with clarity, with purpose. And this is what allows the legacy to continue, not as something forced, but as something natural, something that flows from the alignment you have established, from the patterns you have chosen, from the direction you have set. And as this continues to unfold, you realize that what you are building is not temporary. It is something that carries forward, something that extends beyond your present moment, something that reflects the choices you have made and the alignment you have maintained, something that continues to grow, to influence, and to expand in ways that are steady, intentional, and deeply rooted in the clarity and purpose you have chosen to live from, allowing that legacy to take shape through every thought, every decision, every moment you remain aligned with what you are building, what you are establishing, and what you are continuing to create as you move forward with calm strength, steady awareness, and a quiet, unwavering commitment to shaping a direction that reflects not what was inherited, but what has been intentionally formed through your choices, your alignment, and your consistent dedication to building something new that continues to unfold with clarity, stability, and purpose. In every step you take and every moment you remain grounded in the awareness of what you are creating and what you are becoming. There is a way of living that is not driven by pressure, not shaped by fear, and not dependent on constant external validation, but anchored in a deep, steady awareness of who you are and how you are meant to move forward. It is a life that flows from within rather than being controlled from the outside. And when you begin to walk in this way, something shifts quietly yet powerfully. You begin to experience life not as something that happens to you, but as something you engage with intentionally and consciously. Walking in victory is often misunderstood as the absence of difficulty, but in its true form, it is the presence of clarity. It is the ability to remain steady even when circumstances fluctuate, to remain grounded even when uncertainty appears, to remain aligned even when old patterns attempt to resurface. It is not about controlling everything around you. It is about maintaining alignment within yourself, because victory begins in the internal space. Before it is seen externally, it is established internally. In your thoughts, your beliefs, your perspective. You begin to see yourself differently, not through the lens of past limitations, but through a renewed awareness of your capacity to choose, to grow, and to move forward. This shift in awareness changes the way you approach life. You no longer move from reaction, you move from intention. You no longer feel defined by what has happened. You begin to define your direction by what you choose now. And in that choice, there is power. Purpose also becomes clearer in this space, not as something distant that you are searching for, but as something that unfolds as you remain aligned. It reveals itself through your consistency, through your awareness, through your willingness to stay present and engaged in your own growth. You begin to realize that purpose is not always found in grand moments, but in steady alignment. In the way you show up each day, in the way you respond to challenges, in the way you remain committed to clarity even when things are uncertain. It is expressed through your actions, through your decisions, through your presence. And as you continue in this alignment, authority becomes natural, not something you try to demonstrate, but something that is reflected in the way you live. A quiet confidence, a steady presence, a grounded awareness that influences how you think, how you respond, how you move forward. This authority is not forceful, it is calm. It does not demand attention, it carries presence. It allows you to remain steady without needing to prove anything, to move forward